Homeownership is supposed to be simple. You buy a house, you maintain your property, and you live without anyone trying to steal what's yours. But when you live next to a Karen, nothing is ever simple.
Welcome to Karen Chronicles. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating even better content. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started.
And one morning, I walked outside to find that Karen had built a fence on my land, the unwanted fence. It started like any other morning. I stepped outside with my coffee, took a deep breath of fresh air, and admired my backyard, the same yard I had taken care of for years. But then, I noticed something off. A brand new wooden fence stretched across the side of my yard, one that hadn't been there the night before. I frowned. Whose fence was that? Then I saw her, standing on her patio, arms crossed, looking far too pleased. With herself. Karen. She waved fake cheerfully. "Oh, I see you noticed the fence," I blinked. "Yeah, I noticed. Why is it on my property?" Karen's smug expression didn't waver. "Oh, that's just a small adjustment. I've been meaning to expand my yard for years, and I thought, why not? Your side yard is just sitting there wasting space." I stared at her. Did she seriously just say that? At Karen's ridiculous justification, Karen walked over, gesturing at the fence like she was presenting a masterpiece. "You see," she continued, "my yard is so small compared to yours. It's only fair that we share. I figured you wouldn't mind, since it's not like you're using this space." I felt my jaw clench. "Karen," I said slowly, "you can't just take my land because you feel entitled to it." She sighed dramatically. "Oh, don't be so possessive. The HOA always encourages neighborly cooperation, and besides, this is just a fence. What harm does it do?" I took a deep breath. It does harm when someone trespasses, builds on my land, and then acts like it's theirs. Karen rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. Just let me keep it. Be a good neighbor." I smirked. "Karen, I think it's time we check something. The property lines." Bringing in the authorities, within 24 hours, I had contacted a land surveyor to officially confirm the property boundaries, reported Karen's fence to the local zoning office, gathered all my legal property documents, and wouldn't you know it, the fence was deep into my land. So when the county inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, Karen finally realized she was in trouble. Karen's panic mode. The moment the inspector confirmed that the fence violated property laws, Karen went from smug to desperate. She huffed. "This is so unfair. Can't we just make an exception?" The inspector didn't blink. "No, ma'am, you cannot steal land. The fence needs to be removed immediately, or you will face legal consequences." Karen's face turned bright red. But that's not fair," she whined. "His yard is so much bigger. He should be willing to share." The inspector simply handed her a notice. "You have 7 days to remove the fence before you're fined. If you don't comply, the county will remove it at your expense." Karen stomped her foot like a child. "You people are ridiculous," she snapped. "This isn't over." But as she stormed back inside, I just smiled. Because it was over. Her fence would be gone soon, and Karen, she had just learned a valuable lesson. You can't just take what isn't yours, and if you try, you will lose. Karen wasn't just a bad neighbor, she was a menace. First, she built a fence on my land without permission. When she was forced to remove it, I thought that would be the end of it. But Karen, she wasn't the type to accept defeat. And the next stunt she pulled, it wasn't just illegal. It was disastrous. A shocking phone call. I had been out of town for a week, taking a much-needed vacation. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of a frantic voicemail from my neighbor, Greg. "Hey, man, call me as soon as you get this. Something happened to your property while you were gone. It's bad." My stomach dropped. I called Greg back immediately. "What happened?" Greg took a deep breath. "Karen cut down your tree." I froze. "She what?" "She hired some random guys while..." You were gone and had them cut down that big oak tree in your backyard. And, he hesitated. And what, Greg? Greg sighed. It fell on her house. Karen's catastrophic mistake. The moment I got home, I saw the damage. My 150-year-old oak tree, gone. Karen's roof, caved in, windows shattered, gutters crushed, and part of the structure destroyed. It was a disaster. And then I saw Karen. She stood in her driveway, arms crossed, waiting for me. The moment I stepped out of my car, she marched over, face red with fury. "This is your fault," she screamed. I blinked. My fault? Before I could even respond, she shoved a stack of papers in my face. "Karen tries to play the victim. You owe me for this," she snapped. "I expect full compensation for the damage to my house, my hotel stay, and my emotional distress." I stared at her. Then I burst out laughing. "Karen," I said, "let me get this straight. You cut down my tree illegally, and it destroyed your house, and you want me to pay for it." Her eye twitched. "It was a dangerous tree," she shrieked. "It was an eyesore. It was lowering property values. I was doing the neighborhood a favor." I took a deep breath. "Karen," I said slowly, "how exactly did you get a permit to cut down my tree?" She hesitated. "Well, I didn't get a permit, but—" I held up a hand. "Who did you hire?" She crossed her arms. "A professional tree service." I raised an eyebrow. "Name?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. "It doesn't matter," she snapped. "They did the job, and now you need to pay for the damages." The truth comes out. I pulled out my phone. No tree removal permits filed. No licensed companies registered for work in the area. And then Greg, my neighbor, walked up with security footage. He hit play, and on the screen, a beat-up pickup truck pulling up. Two guys in ripped jeans and no safety gear pulling out chainsaws. No permits, no supervision, just reckless hacking. The moment the tree tilted the wrong way and crashed into Karen's house, I turned to her. "Karen," I said, "you didn't hire a licensed company, did you?" Her face went pale. I smirked. "Looks like you hired some random guys off Craigslist." She didn't respond because she knew she was caught. Calling the authorities, within 30 minutes I had filed a police report for property destruction, contacted my lawyer to send a cease and desist letter, called the city to report an illegal tree removal. And when the authorities arrived, Karen tried to lie her way out of it, but with video evidence, no permits, a damaged house as proof. The officer just shook his head. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "you're facing multiple fines for illegal property damage, hiring unlicensed contractors, and reckless endangerment." Karen's mouth fell open. But he should have moved the tree sooner," she whined, pointing at me. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, it was his tree, on his property, that you illegally cut down. You're lucky you're not facing criminal charges." Karen looked like she was about to explode. The fallout. Karen was fined thousands of dollars for illegal property destruction. She had to pay out of pocket to repair her own roof. The city blacklisted her from filing any property modifications without an inspection. And the best part, I sued her for property destruction and won. Her reaction when she got served the lawsuit? Priceless. Because now, Karen wasn't just a neighborhood menace. She was broke. And this was just the beginning. Karen had already lost big. She had illegally cut down my tree. She had destroyed her own house in the process. She had been fined and sued for damages. Anyone with common sense would have cut their losses and moved on. But Karen, she had no common sense. Instead of accepting responsibility, she did what all entitled people do when they get caught. She played the victim. And the next thing I knew, I was being sued. The ridiculous lawsuit. It started with a formal court summons. Karen was suing me for negligence, claiming I should have removed the tree before it unexpectedly fell. Property damage, blaming me for her destroyed roof. Emotional distress, because apparently her own mistake traumatized her. I actually laughed out loud when I read it, because Karen, she had no case, and I had all the proof I needed to destroy her in court. Courtroom showdown. The courtroom was packed. Karen sat at her table wearing a cheap blazer and fake confidence. Her lawyer, a sleazy guy who clearly didn't do his research, sat beside her. I sat with my attorney, completely calm, because I knew how this was going to go. The judge, an older woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, looked at Karen. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said, flipping through the lawsuit. "You are suing your neighbor for damages caused by a tree that fell onto your home?" Karen nodded eagerly. "Yes, Your Honor, he was reckless. That tree was a hazard and should have been removed long ago." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you claim it fell naturally?" Karen put on her best fake sadness. "Yes, it just came crashing down, out of nowhere. It was terrifying," I smirked. Because it was time to end this. Exposing Karen's lies, my lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "we have video evidence proving that Mrs. Reynolds is lying." The judge nodded. "Proceed." My lawyer pressed play, and on the screen, a beat-up pickup truck pulling up. 2 unlicensed workers taking out chainsaws. Karen standing right there directing them, the moment the tree collapsed onto her own house. The courtroom was dead silent. Karen's fake confidence evaporated. Her lawyer's face turned pale. The judge turned to Karen. "Mrs. Reynolds, would you like to explain why you claim this tree fell naturally when we have clear evidence that you hired people to illegally cut it down?" Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she did what she always did. She doubled down. Karen's pathetic excuse. "Well, technically it wouldn't have fallen if he had cut it down first," she blurted. The judge's face darkened. "So now you're saying it's his fault for not removing his own tree, so you decided to take it upon yourself, without permission, without a permit, and without licensed professionals, to cut it down." Karen gritted her teeth. "It was an eyesore. He should have gotten rid of it sooner. I was forced to take action. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing." The judge sighed. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said slowly, "you do understand that you just admitted to committing property destruction, trespassing, and hiring illegal labor, correct?" Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer, he started packing up his briefcase, because even he knew she had lost. The final verdict. Karen's lawsuit was dismissed immediately. She was fined for perjury, lying under oath. She was ordered to pay my legal fees, and my separate lawsuit for damages was now even stronger. "Karen?" She sat there speechless, humiliated, completely defeated. The judge banged the gavel. Case dismissed. I stood up, shook my lawyer's hand, and walked out, victorious. "Karen?" She stormed out, muttering under her breath. But she knew. This wasn't just a court loss. This was the beginning of her complete downfall. Karen had tried everything to escape responsibility. She stole my land by illegally building a fence and lost. She cut down my 150-year-old oak tree and destroyed her own house in the process. She sued me, claiming the tree randomly fell, and got humiliated in court. But now she was facing the biggest financial disaster of her life, because what she did wasn't just illegal, it was expensive, and today she was about to pay the ultimate price. Back in court, the final judgment. The courtroom was packed again. Karen sat at the defense table, looking exhausted and defeated. Her lawyer looked even worse, as if he knew this was a lost cause. I sat with my lawyer, completely calm and collected, because this time, I wasn't on defense. This was my lawsuit against Karen, and the evidence was airtight. The expert testimony, my lawyer stood up first. "Your Honor, we have brought in a professional arborist to assess the value of the tree that Mrs. Reynolds illegally destroyed." The judge nodded. "Proceed." An older gentleman in a suit and tie stepped up to the stand. "Can you state your qualifications?" my lawyer asked. The arborist adjusted his glasses. "I have over 30 years of experience in forestry, tree valuation, and environmental impact assessments. I have testified in hundreds of court cases regarding tree-related damages. My lawyer nodded. In your professional opinion, what was the value of the tree in question? The arborist pulled out his official report. This was a 150-year-old white oak in excellent health, providing environmental and property value benefits. The estimated replacement cost, factoring in age, size, and ecological contribution, is valued at $240,000, the courtroom murmured. Karen's face drained of color. Karen tries to fight it. Karen's lawyer stood up quickly. Objection. That number is outrageous. No tree is worth that much. The judge raised an eyebrow. Counselor, do you have any evidence to dispute this valuation? Karen's lawyer flipped through his papers. Then he sighed. No, Your Honor. The judge turned to Karen. Mrs. Reynolds, you cut down a protected tree without a permit. You hired unlicensed contractors to do the job. And as a result, you caused significant financial damage to your neighbor. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Karen swallowed hard. Then she did what she always did. She deflected. This is ridiculous, she whined. He should have removed the tree himself. It was only a matter of time before it fell. If anything, I saved him the trouble. The judge sighed. Mrs. Reynolds, you are responsible for this destruction. The law is clear. You will be held accountable. The final verdict. Karen was ordered to pay $240,000 in damages, the full replacement value of the tree. She was fined thousands more by the city for illegally cutting down a protected tree. She was officially blacklisted from making any property modifications without government oversight. Karen? She sat there, completely frozen. Because she knew. She didn't have that kind of money. Karen's financial ruin, the moment we stepped out of the courtroom, her reality hit. She still had a massive hole in her roof from the fallen tree. She had no funds to repair it, because every dime was going toward paying me. She had no way out. Her once proud house, the one she lorded over everyone, was now damaged beyond repair. And she was broke. For the first time ever, Karen had lost everything. The neighborhood watches. Her fall, a few days later, I saw her standing outside her house staring at the damage. For years, she had bullied, fined, and harassed people over their homes. Now, she was the one stuck with a disaster, and as I watched her pace back and forth, frantically making phone calls, I realized something. She wasn't trying to fix her house, she was trying to sell it, because Karen, she was out of options, and soon, she would be out of the neighborhood too. Karen had spent years trying to control the neighborhood. She built a fence on my land and was forced to tear it down. She cut down my 150-year-old tree and destroyed her own house. She sued me and got humiliated in court. She was fined and ordered to pay me $240,000, money she didn't have. And now it was time for my final move, because while Karen was stuck in financial ruin, I was about to upgrade my property in the most satisfying way possible, rebuilding bigger and better. The first thing I did with my 6-figure court settlement? Planted a brand new oak tree, even bigger than the one Karen destroyed. Installed a brand new patio, fire pit, and outdoor kitchen. Built a gorgeous playground for the neighborhood kids. And where did I put all of this? Right in Karen's direct line of sight. Every morning, when she looked out her window, she saw me enjoying my winnings. Karen's house becomes a disaster. Meanwhile, Karen was struggling. She had no money left to repair her house properly. She could only afford cheap, mismatched roofing materials, making her house look ridiculous. Half her roof was new. The other half looked like a hurricane hit it. The once perfect HOA Queen's house was now the biggest eyesore in the neighborhood, and everyone noticed. Karen becomes the laughingstock of the neighborhood as. Much as Karen tried to pretend nothing was wrong, the neighbors weren't stupid. She tried to gossip and turn people against me, but no one listened. She complained about my extravagant upgrades, but I had won them fair and square. She even tried to convince the HOA to fine me, But the HOA had new leadership. And the best part, when she tried to play the victim, people just laughed because after years of bullying everyone else, she was finally powerless. The final moment one evening, as I was grilling steaks on my new patio, I saw Karen standing at her window, watching. She looked miserable. I grabbed a cold drink, raised it in the air, and gave her a smirk and a nod, a silent toast to her downfall. She slammed her blinds shut, because she knew I had won. The lesson: Karen never learned. Karen thought she could lie, steal, and manipulate her way through life. She thought power was permanent, but in the end, she lost her reputation, she lost her home's value, she lost the respect of the entire neighborhood. And me, I didn't just win the case, I won my peace. Because the neighborhood, it was finally free from Karen. And I had the last laugh. Lessons from Karen's downfall: integrity, accountability, and the power of resilience. Karen's story is more than just a neighborhood dispute. It's a powerful lesson about integrity, accountability, and resilience. One of the biggest takeaways is that actions have consequences. Karen spent years bullying her neighbors, manipulating rules and abusing power, thinking she was untouchable. But power built on lies, intimidation, and selfishness is never permanent. In the end, she wasn't just defeated by lawsuits or fines, she was destroyed by her own arrogance and greed. This story also reinforces the importance of standing up for your rights. Many people in Karen's position rely on fear and intimidation to control others. The easiest choice is often to ignore, comply, or avoid confrontation, but that only gives bullies more power. By fighting back with knowledge, patience, and legal action, the main character didn't just win for himself, he helped restore balance to the entire neighborhood. Another key lesson is the importance of community. Karen thrived for so long because people were too afraid or too isolated to challenge her. But when the community came together, they exposed her for what she truly was: a fraud. Bullies succeed in silence, but they fail when people unite. Perhaps the most satisfying lesson is that true success isn't about destroying others, it's about building something better. Instead of focusing on revenge, the main character chose to improve his home, invest in his community, and enjoy life. This is a reminder that the best way to defeat negativity isn't just by winning a fight, but by thriving despite it. At its core, this story is about justice. It's proof that karma is real and that character matters. Karen believed she could bend the world to her will, but in the end, she was the one who had to live with the consequences of her own choices. And that's the lesson. Power without accountability is temporary. Bullies only win when people stay silent. The best revenge is living well, because when you stand your ground, fight for what's right, and refuse to be intimidated, you always win in the end.